On today's episode of Recruiting Roundtable, we have an all-star panel, maybe one of the best our show has ever had. We're going to be talking about building and scaling solutions or sales or business engineering teams. I mean, different companies call them different things, so we'll talk about that today. This is a really interesting topic for me because solutions engineering sits at the intersection of business, technology, product, and hiring like really amazing people for these teams can be an interesting challenge. And we have no better panel to speak about doing that than the people we have today. So we have Tony Melrose, Senior Director, Solutions Engineering at Box. We have Christine Liu, CTO, Business Engineering, North America at Meta, and Jessica Broderick, Head of Vertical Solutions Engineering at Asana. Tony, Christine, Jessica, thanks so much for joining. We appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right. So let's start with some intros. If you just kind of introduce yourself and maybe your company and just a short intro, that'd be great. Let's start with Jessica.
Hi, everybody. Jessica Broderick. I currently work at Asana, which is a collaborative work management platform, helping anywhere from small businesses to enterprise manage their collaboration across their entire company. And I've been in the pre-sale space for 7 years now.
Very good. Thank you, Jessica. Let's go with Christine.
Hi, everyone. Christine Liu here. I'm at Meta. I cover our ads business. I've been on the business engineering team here for about 12 years, worked across partnerships, agencies, mid-market business, some of our top customers. So excited to be on the podcast today.
Great. Thank you, Christine. And Tony?
That leaves me. I'm Tony Melrose. I work at Box, cloud content management platform. I've been with the company for just over 9 years, and I run actually a few of our SE specialist functions. So I've got a team of developers, a team of value engineers, and a team of SE architects who report into me.
Great. Thank you, Tony. And last but not least, I guess, my name is Sean Hoon. I'm the host of this podcast. I'm from Rocket, and we take a scientific approach to recruiting by combining our talented recruiters, our AI model that we've trained over 7 years, and our programmatic sourcing techniques to help find and engage candidates in ways that are impossible to do with traditional tools like LinkedIn. Okay, so let's take a step back because all three of you have been in this solutions engineering sphere for fairly sizable time, right? Like I think it was like 7, 9, 12 years, right? So, and we all talked in the pre-show about how it's evolved, right? Like this kind of role has evolved where maybe 10 years ago, it wasn't as common as you see now, right? And so I'd like to just learn a little bit about kind of how you got into this, right? Like how solutions engineering became like a career path for you. Maybe we'll start with Christine.
Sure. So actually my story started back in college. I went into undergrad as pre-business. And, when you go into business, it's like the traditional kind of ABCs, the accounting, banking, consulting. And I had gotten feedback that, a lot of seniors who are graduating really hoped that they were more technical. So I ended up adding computer science. And when I was recruiting, I wanted to find these roles that blended technology and business together. So I went down the more traditional paths of like doing PM, doing TPM. And then I came across, actually for us, it was also called solutions engineering back in the day. And the role really spoke to me a lot more because I was able to be hands-on engineering and actually write code as opposed to just leveraging like the technical background. So that's kind of a little bit of, how I got into this space and also why I've stayed in it for a very long time because there's so many different, skill sets that I get to use and different customers that I get to talk with and products that I get to build. So it keeps things interesting.
Mm-hmm. Great. Jessica?
Yeah, I would say that I have not met a single person who has had a linear career trajectory within solutions engineering. So lots of different backgrounds. Similar to Christine, I was actually an electrical engineering major. So I did do some system validation before realizing that I like the technical side, but I also really wanted to talk more to people. So when I landed myself within the SaaS world, I did a little bit of everything. I was in sales, I was in product, I was in go-to-market, business development, and then sales engineering kind of became a thing. And it was this beautiful cross between, being technical, but also being personable, building relationships similar to what you see in sales. And again, just like Christine said, I've found my passion here, and I feel like this is where I'm going to be for the long run.
Great. And Tony, tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a very similar background in the sense that I'm a people person, but I'm a technical person. I like to do a mix of both things. And, when I was in college, I actually used to joke with my friends that I think the perfect job for me would be selling technology to people with a lot more money than I have. And, at the time I was thinking like home automation and kind of fun stuff like that. But really what it turned into was this is the right path for me, right? I really wanted to sell technology. I've wanted to help people realize the benefits of technology since undergrad. And I have a slightly technical background. I started a company right when I was in my senior year of college. I built a web application, really focused on the technical side. And then over the years, I've spent a lot more time focusing on building kind of those selling skills and working with people. So yeah, very similar background, something I've obviously been passionate about because I used to make jokes about it and now I get to live it. It's incredible.
Dreams fulfilled. We love that.
That's right.
So I'm very interested in this topic. As some of you know, I started my tech career at Salesforce, and some of former like account executives I know went on to be sales engineers, and we as AEs really lean on sales engineers or solutions engineers to help us close deals. So I'm curious as to, and this was like, I'm dating myself now, probably a good 10 years ago I was there. I'm curious of like the progression, because I think we've talked to each of you about how you hired sales engineers and what that looked like potentially in the early days, maybe like 10 years ago, 10, 6, 10, 9, 8 years ago, and what it looks like now. If you could walk us through how that's changed and how you've approached hiring, I think it would be very interesting. Let's start with Jessica.
Sure. So I think there was definitely a point where we hired solutions engineers internally within companies from other roles. So it could be a BDR or a CSM or somebody on the operations team who maybe knew the technology but had never been in a sales engineering position before. And they would start as an associate, work their way up to sales engineer, senior sales engineer, and kind of rise through the ranks. But now we're definitely hiring people who have been in this role for 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and getting some really, really great talent. I know I talked about this on the pre-show, but now there are things out there like Pre-Sales Collective, which is bringing solution engineers together and really creating a community around that type of role. And I think now people know that it's more of a career path than it was back in the day.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Tony, what about you? Have you seen a shift in how you hire?
Yeah, I think, just kind of echoing that and doubling down, I started as an internal resource, and I actually started in product support, and I was helping our, developers build on top of our APIs. And I was one of those people who came through the ranks, so to speak. And now, exactly to Jessica's point, there are people who have this experience, this background, there's groups, there's all of these things that didn't exist. And so, when you take that into how you hire and when you look at candidates, what it really does is it opens up a lot more backgrounds. It creates a lot more diversity in the pipeline. It creates a lot more opportunities for us to look at, you don't have to be a product expert on our product. You have this set of skills that are transferable from other places, other things that you've done. And it really helps unlock a lot of potential growth for the teams and for individuals. And, it's becoming much more of a sought after career path and market. And honestly, it's just really exciting.
Mm-hmm. Christine?
So we started this team 13 years ago, a little bit before I joined. And so I've seen, and at the time I was the 12th person on the team. Now we have maybe 400 or 500 globally. So I kind of break it down in this like, initial early incubation days, and then our hyper growth scale days, and then now that we're mature. In the early days, we actually used to try to hire the kind of what we call like for these unicorns, for people who are, true solutions engineering or business engineering at heart. A lot of these folks were entrepreneurs in their past, right? Who, because they were building their own business, they were talking to their customers directly. They had learned those soft skills, but they were also, for example, like CTOs of their business. So they were actually building out the product, hands-on writing code. And when we got into the hyperscale phase, we realized it's really hard to find those people at the scale that we needed to hire at. And so actually, what Tony mentioned really resonates a lot, where we started to shift our profile and look for folks with transferable skills, right? We also had to change the way that we recruited for. When we were smaller, our interview process was such that nobody really like checked what we were asking for in these interviews, so we kind of got to do whatever we wanted. But we would have people build like a demo app, anything that they wanted, and just show us, right? And that kind of showed a little bit of their creativity, their product sense, like how they would think about, marketing this to a customer, what problem they're solving for. So it really hit on a lot of kind of the key skills that we look for. But as we started to scale, we got some feedback that that's actually not a very fair interview, because it just wasn't fair for underrepresented minorities. It wasn't fair for like moms entering the workforce who didn't have time to build this app on the side, who maybe didn't have like a second laptop to build this app on the side. So we had to kind of mature in how we interviewed as well. And then now that we're, a very large organization, the last thing that, or the last evolution of the organization was actually changing the different role profiles that we have. So before, we only had business engineers who did everything, who talked to customers, did the integration work, and then also built product in-house on Meta's product stack. And we added on in recent years, probably like 5 years ago now, a solutions architect function. So that kind of spoke to like, hey, a lot of our role really is driving that integration with customers. And so we'll have like a dedicated, job profile that does that. And that's actually, it was a little easier to hire for that, because that's like a well-known kind of role in the industry. So that helped us scale a little bit too.
Interesting.
Yeah,
Go ahead,
I think that's a really great point. Just that like, there are so many now different lenses of solutions engineering, solutions architecture, business value, demo engineers, kind of all of these sub-organizations that live under a solutions umbrella, which are also really great assets to, sales teams and collaboratively, across the company.
Yeah. Well, while I have you here, Jessica, when you're interviewing candidates, because like I mentioned it on the top, right, there's like this intersection between business and technology and product. What are some of the things you're looking for in a candidate? Because like I think it's really hard to be amazing in all those facets. Like, there are some, like, to Christine's point, unicorns that are amazing there, but I think, again, to what Christine was saying, when you're scaling, you might not be able to get all three, right? Like you might only get like one or two that the candidate's really good at. So what are some of the qualities that you're looking for when you're interviewing? And then I'll ask the rest of the panel as well.
Yeah, I think in every company I've worked for, we definitely kind of anchor our interview process around a set of traits or skills that we're looking for, because exactly like you said, people come from all different backgrounds and we're looking for a certain type of person. The biggest ones that I like to anchor around are the ability to learn. I know we've kind of talked about this, but like being technical versus being able to build relationships, right? Like I think one of those things is easier to teach than the other. So if we could teach somebody, the way that we usually do this as well, or what I've done in the past, is if somebody is giving a final presentation, right, like giving them feedback on it beforehand and seeing how they incorporate that, right, and kind of take the recommendations that you've made and put that into the final presentation, because I think it's so important. And like, yeah, you can ask them situational questions, but testing for it in practice, I found, is actually a little bit more effective. Other things is just like their ability to think critically about a solution, right? And kind of what is the problem that we're solving for and what is the correct solution for that. Obviously, really core and fundamental to the role. But you just want somebody who's eager, curious, they've got self-confidence. A lot of times you're going toe-to-toe with CIOs, CTOs, CEOs, kind of back to what Tony said. It's a little bit of an adrenaline rush to sit in a room with some of these people and say, I've got a product, that can fix your business or improve it or make it better. So you really have to have like the right type of persona to be able to do that in an effective way, who comes in really confident and inspires trust in the person that they're talking to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I think you nailed that, right? You have to be able to show up as an expert to these people who are experts, and you have to have the confidence, you have to have that personability, and you can't just have the answers. Having the answers is important. You have to have the answers, but you also have to be personable. You also have to be able to engage in a way that makes people believe you and listen to you. And earlier we were kind of talking about there's now specialty functions, and that's literally all I do. I hire for these specialty functions, and you have to sometimes be the person who says, no, we can't do that. And you can't do that if you don't have confidence. You can't do that if you can't build relationships, because the same people that you might be saying no to are also the same people that you rely on to pull you into deals. And if you burn a bridge every time you say no, you're not going to have a job for very long, because no one's going to pull you into opportunities. So that resonated really well with me, and I just had to jump in. And I mean, you touched on almost everything else. The other thing that I would add would just be grit. It's not easy. It's not an easy job. You're not walking in and shaking hands and getting a contract for millions of dollars the next day. I wish it was that easy, but it just really isn't. So you need people who can push through and can persevere.
I love the grit element, because that's like, we hire a lot of people that come from software engineering backgrounds that haven't worked in a sales facing role and like talking about deals, and they have to convince the customer to do something, and often will get rejected, right? Like a customer's not just going to do something because you ask them to. So I love the grit, and particularly it's been top of mind in recent hiring years. And going back to what you guys both touched on, this element of listening to the customer, empathizing with them, that's one of the main things that we look for as well. We used to have a joke that our superpower is customer centricity. So this joke came about because we did this Family Feud, and so we surveyed our team. It's like, what's your superpower? So we thought it would be like invisibility or like your favorite superpower. And the first one was customer centricity. And we're like, yes, this is the culture that we're looking for. But really, it's just like listening to them. And part of our naming for solutions engineering was also like, we wanted to emphasize that we're not just pitching products to customers and getting them to like buy whatever things that we're selling, but like we really want a solution and understand what their problem is, and package something up that actually solves for that. Obviously, in the ideal scenario, yes, using the products that we do sell, but like with their business kind of mindset first and foremost, in solving their business problems.
There's a ton to unpack there. I want to just kind of go back a little bit to what Tony was saying about being an expert. I mean, that really resonated with me, because I think to be successful in like a strategic sales role, and when you have your little pod that's trying to sell this deal or whatever it is, you're trying to become an expert in someone's business that they are, to your point, Tony, an expert in. And you may be trying to do this in like, I don't know, 3, 4, 5, 6 discovery calls, right? It's really hard to do that and to do it with credibility, because you're not only trying to understand, to your point, Christine, their business, but on the technical side, you need to like try to get your head around their system architecture and how what you're presenting fits into that ecosystem, right? So it's very challenging and it's very interesting. So I want to get back to the relationships with salespeople, because I'm a salesperson, and I worked with sales engineers, and as a salesperson, I rely on them. But also, salespeople, they're motivated primarily by their quota. Let's be honest, right? Like that's what it is. I think typically sales engineers, solution engineers, they're motivated a little bit differently. But I'm curious to get feedback because maybe I'm a little bit out of the loop. Maybe we'll start with Tony, since you kind of like got me thinking about this. How do you feel? Talk to me about the dynamic between your team. So I know you have, and also like you told me you have a value engineering team, which kind of presents the business case, and then you have like a demo engineering team. How do those teams kind of like work with the salespeople so that it's all, working in harmony and you're achieving your objectives of closing deals?
Yeah, harmony. I wish. It's, I think it's a really good question. It's an interesting thing to try to balance because, if you think about, let's just take two of the teams, right? The architect team and the value engineering team. They're working in different work streams. They're engaging in different ways. They have different stakeholders, the customer that they are working with. Internally, the solutions architects are more aligned to elevating the SE and helping the SE really understand the technical depth that they need to. When you look at value engineering, you're starting to think about, ROI and business value creation, and, the two overlap a meaningful amount, but the work streams and the ways that they engage are so different that, for me, the biggest challenge actually that I've had is how do I scale the teams and the way that they engage? Because naturally they want to engage differently. And there are times and there are ways where that's actually a good thing, right? I don't want a solutions architect to sit down with a CSM and do a discovery thing on value creation. That should be the value engineering role. But what I don't want to happen is for the business to say, I don't know who to go to. Tony, can you help? And when you create too many offshoots of this team does this thing, but not that thing, that's what you sometimes can run into. And so for me, the biggest thing is it's about being approachable. It's about, I like to take on hard problems. I like to solve hard problems. I like to do things that people think are almost impossible. And I find that really fun. And the people that I hired have a very similar mindset. And because of that, when someone comes to them with maybe an abnormal question or something that isn't in their wheelhouse, they're not just going to punt it. And the focus that we have is, our customers are our internal customers as much as they are those external customers. So our partners in the SE team, our partners in the sales team, customer success, in professional services, those are all our customers. And we have to service them all the same way that we would service a customer who's paying us money. And that mindset is just very ingrained in the way that we operate, because without supporting those teams effectively, we're left out in the cold.
Mm-hmm. Very interesting. Jessica, what are your thoughts on this?
We love our sales partners. Let's just start with that. I definitely think that a good SE-AE pair up is just like partners in crime, people who are really approaching things together and playing off each other's strengths in order to bring in a specific opportunity. That being said, sometimes ratios are less than ideal. When you're thinking about how many AEs an individual solutions engineer could be supporting, sometimes we see as high as 1 to 9 in the smaller business units. So I think it's really important to have a process, similar to what Tony was saying, just like a rules of engagement of when you should reach out, how you should work together, just some guidelines, especially as new people are coming into the business. I think the function looks a little bit different everywhere. So it's important to have something for them to essentially reference for, this is the gold standard of how we work together. But I think you got to be flexible. There's always things that happen. Smaller opportunities come in where they need a really quick touch, or you're working outside of your region or area on a big strategic opportunity. There's just you can't predict it. And we are really that resource that they rely on so heavily for those more technical conversations or anything that they feel just is out of the realm of their knowledge. And as you get into more technical products, like we see this even more and more. Tony's team, the solutions architects, we call those they're the SEs, right? Like they're the people that we go to. So I think sales across the board is really a team sport. And figuring out how all the different pieces work together is just part of really coming up with something that makes the company wildly successful.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. You gotta have some like cohesion within the team, right? And because if you don't, it just falls apart, and it falls apart quickly. So, Christine, I know when we talked, you have small teams that are really focused on like a small number of clients, right? So, can you talk to us about like how you kind of organize those teams and how your team works with the salespeople?
Yeah, I was gonna start off with our relationship. Like, we have structured the team to be very supportive of sales, even so much in how we like organize. So many years ago, we even had this. We do reorg like every 2 weeks here. So many
You
years ago,
meta? No, never.
I know, right? No change at all that happens here. But we had the option of deciding, does the solutions engineering team sit within sales or does it actually sit within product? Because we do, build products at the end of the day. And our VP was very intentional that it sits with sales, right? It is a function that partners with sales, particularly to drive technical investments. So as we kind of onboard new hires, we're very deliberate about making sure that they understand how to align their goals with sales goals, which, as you mentioned, is very quota based, right? And we even go through very like intentional activities to ensure that those goals stay aligned. So, you called out we have a very low kind of ratio mapping. So any one of our engineers probably only works with maybe 2 or 3 top accounts at a given time. And we're actually going through this process right now at the start of the half, but we'll go through and have them do this like joint account planning exercise with their salespeople. So they'll forecast out, for this half, what are the key initiatives that we're trying to drive? What are the things that business engineering is going to own, and what is the outcome that we're expecting? We've also tried to teach our business engineers like how to think about the business. So we used to have this notion that they should be co-pilots with their sales teams, that not only is the salesperson the one who is bringing the customer context and all of that, but the business engineer should be proactively coming up with ideas of how to drive that customer's business forward together. So some of the things that we've taught our BEs to do is like how to read earnings calls, how to like think in the mind of a CMO, particularly for us as we work on the advertising side, and how to like kind of parse together all these different pieces of information to develop out a strategy that is supportive of sales. But I think at the end of the day, just to add like one final thing is particularly for our role, I love the fact that we are sales facing because you end up seeing the impact of the work that you do, right? So we talk about like growing our customers' business over time. And I've heard stories where it's like, oh, I've seen, my counterpart at whatever the customer side, they've ended up getting promoted as a result of the project that we did together. Like this company's business grew 10x, year over year. And so it's like really rewarding to be able to have that connection and see that, as opposed to like if you think of maybe a traditional software engineering job where you see the data but you don't see the human side of it necessarily.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, that's part of the reasons I love being in sales too, right? You just it's amazing when you even like plant the idea. Like if you plant the seed and then it grows, that's even more rewarding than if they came to you. I want to talk about a topic that was brought up briefly by Tony. I know we didn't talk too much about hiring, but that's okay. Like I'm enjoying this conversation about like prioritizing, and like maybe like I'm sure every one of you, this has happened before. The AE comes to you and says, "Hey, my customer wants this," and it's some like abstract thing that it's kind of outside the box, and maybe you've never heard of it before, and you don't even know if it's like possible to be done. And then, to Jessica's point, in like a small business unit, maybe that customer is not spending a lot of money with you and they want something very highly complex. So I guess where I'm going with this is, how do you pick how do you prioritize that work? How do you pick the opportunities that you're really going to resource? Is it based on like what the account executive is saying is like, this is what the opportunity is? Or do you look at, do you have to just say no sometimes? Like, this is just way too complex, so you're trying to ask for? I'm curious of like that thought process in terms of how you allocate your team to ensure that you're working on stuff that's actually going to close and is actually going to add value to your business. Sorry, long-winded, but there you go. Jessica, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think this touches on a couple of different areas, right? When somebody's coming to you and they want something custom, my perspective is like a relationship with the product team. A lot of things that get built for one customer can really scale to multiple customers. So every solutions engineer person is really going to have to do an assessment of the ask. I don't think anyone's ever going to say no right off the bat, but maybe pulling solutions architect or other product people to kind of scope what it means and see, is it something that we're going to build custom one-off for this client, or is it really something that should be going on our roadmap? And that way it wouldn't be an out-of-pocket cost for them, but there might be a wait or time period in order to get it done. Tony mentioned this earlier, like sometimes you do have to say no, whether I've been asked many times in my career and something is just like outside of the scope of the product. They're saying, I use this other tool, but I would love to do everything in your tool. And sometimes it's just not possible. So having the confidence to kind of say, like in this case, you should be using 2 different softwares, 2 different tools. You definitely have to do that. But if we can help the customer, and especially if it helps a variety of customers, and it has more long-term revenue impacts, I think we would definitely be willing to take that on. Another aspect that comes into this too is professional services. I think many SaaS companies now have professional services. So is it something that we're willing to build out for them on a one-off basis? And do they
or maybe hire a partner too, right?
Oh, partner networks, yes. I am remiss that I did not mention them as well, but any partner who could be trained on a specific platform, even better if that customer works with that partner already, if they have a GSI or a contract with somebody, and they can go and build it for them as well. So many different avenues to look at. And I think as a solutions resource, we're just trying to figure out like what's in the best interest of the customer, but also, long-term the company.
We used to say, just make it the partner's problem. Let them deal with it. It's a deal for them, right?
To our partners, we want that. We want to set them up for success, obviously, so that way they still want to keep doing it.
Of course. Tony?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would echo everything that Jessica said, right? It's, you have to build those relationships with the resources and the partners, whether it's setting them up for success or bringing them so into the fold that you can actually like bounce ideas off of each other. Hey, I don't know if we can do X. Can you help us do X together for this customer? And some of the most fruitful conversations that we have are those really in-depth conversations with our trusted partners. And so I realized that I kind of took one piece and ran with it, but I think to me there are just so many components of this that even if you just look at partners and setting them up for success and diving into the specifics, our team, like I guess the way to say it is, Jessica, I think you nailed it, right? We're the SEs. So for us, like the hard questions come our way, the complicated situations come our way. Are we vetting it? Are we, doing these things? We uncover a lot of crazy asks. Like there are things where people are like, hey, we used to do this thing like 20 years ago with a mainframe computer, and we wanted to use you to do that. Can we do that? And like sometimes the answer is cloud versus mainframe computer are a little bit different, and we have to talk through that, and that's okay. There are solutions, there are ways that you can modernize the process and change it and move it around. But if a customer is set, you just sometimes have to say no, and those things have to get deprioritized naturally. If you see a path forward, if there's a workaround, if there's something, we are really creative, and I hire really creative, smart people who think of those challenges and think of those workarounds and think of those partners and think of all of those components. And part of what I do is APIs, so integrations and multiple systems together and all of those things, like that's right in the wheelhouse. But still, like sometimes the answer is I have to disqualify this because it's crazy and we can't do it. And I hate doing that, but sometimes you just truly can't.
Mm-hmm. Christine?
I love the kind of ending of like some of these things are crazy. We used to get asked to from an advertising side to say like, hey, we really want to do a brand splash. Can we turn Facebook red for the day? Like, no, we can't do that today. That's also not a scalable kind of product solution for us. We can only do that 365, 366 in a good year, like 2 a year. But in all seriousness, actually going back to what Jessica mentioned, I love what you said about taking the customer feedback or insight and then figuring out if this is a scalable solution. That's definitely our philosophy as well. We have 9 million customers and we can't build one-off things for every single one of them. So we try to take it as like, hey, is this an insight that other customers will have that we can kind of build for? And I'll add that kind of 2 of the maybe skill sets of a strong business engineer is, one, having that intuition to know whether or not this is like a really good idea. I've definitely prioritized and worked and shipped on some products where we didn't really generate a lot of revenue off the back of it. Like we thought that there was going to be a good, opportunity size, but it didn't really pan out. And so kind of building that intuition of things that will get legs of their own and kind of take off after that. And then the second being, I think, Tony, you mentioned this, being like experts, not just in the customer's business, but in the company context and product as well. So one of the things that my team recently worked on, so I cover Reels ads, and we have another advertising product, catalog ads. And we got an insight from a customer. They said, hey, catalog ads doesn't support video today. You keep telling me Reels is important. So like I want to do catalog ads with video and I'll spend 100 million. So I'm sitting here like, that's a pretty good number. Like I will take that, any day. Will other people pay 100 million to do this? And the company context that we brought into the conversation was, okay, yes, this customer is willing to do it. Maybe we got anecdotes from a handful of other customers that they were also be willing to do it. But the context that we had was that catalog ads is actually one of our highest performing direct response advertising products. And the fact that it doesn't support video today is like a huge gap in our kind of product suite. So it had the anecdotal customer feedback, but it also had the internal analysis to say that actually there's a ton of headroom here. It makes sense to invest.
Man, I wish somebody came to me and said, hey, if you build this, I'll give you $100 million. I would do whatever I can to build it. So we've got about 1 minute left, or maybe we'll go 2 minutes. Just I want to go around the horn. I think spend too much time talking about. Tell your dog, hey, we're in a podcast. No worries. I just want to ask this question. So we didn't talk a lot about hiring, which is what this is about. So I should maybe ask a question about hiring. When you're scaling your team, and we'll take like 1 minute each person, do you like think about, okay, hey, if I hired more sales engineers, I could convert more opportunities. So that's why we should hire. Or do you look at it and say, like, do you wait to see the pipeline, right? Like, is it, we have to see the pipeline first and then we can hire, or we have enough pipeline, but if we had more SEs, we could close more of it. Okay. So I'm just curious of like your philosophy, and if you're in a room presenting your business case on why you should hire, what would be a more compelling kind of approach? Let's start with Tony.
Hopefully my dogs stay quiet for this. So I think it becomes a question of chicken and egg, right? You can validate more of the pipeline with more technical resources to support it. if you don't have the pipeline, throwing more bodies at it doesn't really matter. So it's actually, I think, potentially less a question of does pipeline lead to headcount ask, or is there a validation step that's required in there to be able to justify the ask? And one of the things that I think about is we're taking on some interesting new workloads, and they're complicated and they're technical and they're hard things. And I'm starting to see pipeline for my team and our need kind of escalating in more opportunities. Can I make the case now? I would argue no, because none of that's come to fruition. And so I think it becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy where if those deals come to fruition and we can do that and we are tapped and we have to say no to other things, that pattern starts to feed that, hey, guess what? We can actually fund these and add more resources to support.
Good point. Jessica?
I like to approach this from the lens of quota. So yes, you need pipeline, obviously, to hit quota, but sales leaders are given a certain number that they have to hit per year. And what I like to do is look at the resources on my team and realistically, how much coverage we have over that holistic number. So, if you're leaving $14 million in revenue on the table because you don't have solutions resources to support it, I think that's a pretty compelling argument to get more headcount and resources. And then it just comes down to execution on that. But I do want to throw in there that as it pertains to chicken and the egg too, ramp time, having somebody in seat doesn't mean that you have them in seat out there, supporting the sales team. So I think hiring ahead is also really valuable and something that we don't see enough in solutions, to kind of have those resources ready to go at the point when you want to get them out there supporting opportunities. So I do think you still have to make a valid business case, and pipeline definitely matters. But if you look at how much you can support based on the quota, that's where I found a lot of success.
I think she just gave us the blueprint. Christine, you want to take us home?
Yeah, I think, and actually, let me clarify, because maybe I had a different interpretation. But when we talk about pipeline, we're talking about the sales pipeline, or a
sales pipeline.
Yeah,
sales pipeline. Yeah, opportunity pipeline.
Yeah. So I think probably similar to what Jessica mentioned, for us, we're very data driven. So we, over time, have done an analysis on what is the ROI of the team, and what % of the book of business do we cover? And then it becomes a much simpler conversation, right? Because you're well, if we generate, 5-10x ROI and we've only covered 40% of the business, naturally speaking, we can cover more and presumably still hit those numbers. So we're very data driven, and therefore all the conversations just become numbers at the end of the day.
Don't they all in there? Well, Jessica, Tony, Christine, we're out of time. I really appreciated this conversation. We took a deep dive into solutions engineering, which was great. I have I'm going to spend some more time thinking about it, because you piqued my interest today. So thank you so much again. I hope for everyone listening, you learned something today. And till next time, we'll catch you later.